Welcome to Mindful Management, Creating a Trauma-Informed Work Environment, a podcast by Chefalo Consulting, where we share the knowledge, stories, and resources you need to create a trauma-informed culture that supports wellness, growth, and resilience. I'm your host, Shenandoah Chefalo. Hello, welcome everybody. We're so glad you made it to another episode of Mindful Management, Creating a Trauma-Informed Work Environment. Today, I am super excited because we are going to talk about trauma-informed care in both the education and faith settings. And to do that, I'm delighted to welcome a longtime friend of Chefalo Consulting, Dr. Khiela Holmes, who's a clinical psychologist and the founder of Birthing the Gifts, Inc., which specializes in a holistic approach to wellness. Dr. Holmes integrates her deep expertise in psychology with her passion for faith-based initiatives to support mental and emotional health. At Shalom Wellness Services and through her own organization, she focuses on providing comprehensive mental health services that cater to the unique needs of children, youth, adults, and families. Dr. Holmes is dedicated to transforming lives by promoting social emotional wellness and creating supportive environments for personal growth and healing. Join us as we explore her journey and insights into trauma-informed care in educational and faith-based settings. Dr. Holmes, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you for having me, Shan. I'm just excited to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited to have you on. For some of our listeners or those who also come to our Mindful Mondays, you've been a longtime participant in Mindful Mondays, and I'm so glad you carved out a little time to be on the podcast today. Before we get started, your journey into the world of clinical psychology and your focus on trauma-informed care are first inspiring and profound. Can you share with us what initially drew you to even specialize in the particular area of psychology that you find yourself currently?
Wow, okay, good question. Well, again, it is great to be here. So I'm just excited. I love talking about all things mental health, emotional wellness, and trauma-informed care. And I think that's a segue kind of into what, so I'm a person of faith, so I'm going to have to bring that in, Shan. I'm going to have to bring it in. I think that because of my groundedness in faith, and my family guiding me the way that they did with my education, with faith, and just with, I would think, continuing to enrich myself, right? I think without even knowing it, what I've always carried this interest in being concerned with the holistic health of people. I've been concerned with kind of the wellness, particularly of children, youth, and families. So even when I was younger, I at my church, I worked in our nursery, and my mom worked in our children's church, and so it was this interest in working with and supporting people who were serving children. And I was, even with my friends and everything, concerned with their emotional wellness and just kind of leaning into that. So I think as I entered, because I was actually going to do engineering at first. You can't believe it.
Okay. So yeah, there's a story. That's a story. That's a completely different field than this.
Yeah. So I think, because I also have that analytical kind of research mind, I enjoy conceptualizing different concepts and everything. So I think that pulled me in the math direction. But as I, got through really just my first year of college, I quickly realized that what I wanted to dive more deeply in and spend most of my time doing would be a field that was devoted to understanding people, understanding human behavior, and helping people being healthy, well, and whole. So, yeah. So that's what got me into it. And then at that time, honestly, I just had to say it was God that kind of geared it, because I don't know that I looked at all the branches of psychology and said clinical is the one for me. I just think that's the direction it went in, and it worked out.
Yeah. your purpose, right? It became your calling. I just talked about this in one of our previous episodes with Paul McFadden about finding your purpose and your calling. And it sounds like that applies perfectly. So, one of the things that we know is a challenge in this work, and you and I have definitely talked about this numerous times, is that the language, even that we're using. So, before we kind of dive into it, and you already brought it up, can you just explain to us, for you, especially in the work you're doing, what does trauma informed care mean in the context of both education and faith settings? Like, how do we, because I think sometimes we say that buzzword, trauma informed, but what does that mean, do you suppose?
Yeah. What does it mean? I think that's good. Now, Shan, you may know this about me is that presenting something in a concise way might not be my strength, but let me just say the words that come to me. And I'll say first kind of what I think applies maybe universally across settings, across the education and faith setting. So the words that come to me would be safety, right? And because we know it's about humans, in order for us to even get close to thriving and flourishing, we need to feel safe.
Well, I think it's just such the like that word alone, right? Safety, because I know you mean what I mean, which is not just our physical safety. We mean our emotional safety, our psychological safety, our social safety, our financial safety, our racial safety, our cultural safety, right? Like all the ways in which we need safety. And the thing that I keep coming back to, and I hear this with clients that I'm working with, and I know you do too, is I'm not safe. And so then I say, how do we begin to build safety? So, how are you helping in those settings or even in your own office, Dr. Holmes, to help people build safety or figure out what safety is for them? Because it's so different for each of us.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. So when we maybe I'll start with education, so with that, when we're thinking about child serving settings, so when I say education, that is primarily what I've worked with is pre-K. So we're thinking 0 to 5, right? So what does it look like so let me just take a step back. So when I think about trauma informed care, I also think about whatever we're talking about applies to everybody, right? Like it's when we talk about organizations or systems or anything, like it's a whole system, whole organization approach. So of course we may think about, like, even when I say education or child serving, the first question people might think, oh, I want the children to feel safe. And it's like, yes, that's important. And how can the employees feel safe? How can the leaders feel safe? How can the parents and caregivers and everybody, not just the teachers, all school personnel, housekeeping, the kitchen staff, like everybody, the administrative support feel safe? So that's the first thing, is philosophically, I think, understanding that's the conversation we're getting into, is we're going to talk about this and how everybody can have this felt sense of safety. So in a basic way, that could just mean, how can we be consistent with whatever we're doing? How can we create a sense of predictability, structure, reliability, right? So consistent, reliable, attuned. How can leaders be attuned to what their employees need? How can school personnel, teachers, and all other support staff be attuned to what the kiddos need and their families? So basically, so whatever it takes for people to feel valued, seen, and heard, in that they know what to expect.
So I love that, because some of the words you used around safety for me brought up this other really key concept, I think, in trauma informed, which is like when you talk about consistency, predictability, structure, reliability, attuneness, which I love, beautiful word there. I started thinking attachment, right? Like we want to attach to each other, not just in the physical sense of hold me, but in this way of trying to find understanding and connectedness in some way. And so, what do you think is the value of connectedness in relationships in trauma informed spaces? Because I know in organizations that I work with, yours as well, there's this, we don't have time for that. We don't have time for relationships, or it's not professional to have relationships in these settings, right?
Well, Well, I guess first, if that's somebody's thought, I mean, it is maybe important to lean in and kind of better understand where that comes from and why they're thinking that. And I think so foundationally, like if we think about neuroscience and how this idea, and I'm not gonna profess to be some neuroscientist, somebody with all the expertise in that area, while at the same time, what I've read and what I know and what I've experienced is that foundationally we've talked about safety. So if people don't feel safe, children, adults, they act out. We act out because we're trying to get to safety. We're in protective mode and survival mode. So we're just our stress response system, our nervous system is going. Right? So that the first thing is like how can the sense of safety in all domains, like you said. And then the other thing is, am I loved? Am I loved? Do I have a sense of connectedness and belonging? So if we don't feel safe, and then even more so, even if we do feel safe, but certainly if we don't, and then if we don't feel connected or loved or cared for, then we as humans we kind of act out with that too. So that's what trauma informed, that we have to have that understanding. When we say trauma informed, we might just think about trauma, but really with that comes an understanding of how our bodies and our brains are set up. And as humans, it's a need to feel safe. As humans, it's a need to feel loved and connected in a sense of belonging.
So tell us, what do you see, whether in your practice or in the work you're doing, what are some of the common challenges to implementing trauma informed practices? So let's just say, listen, I do deeply care about people. Maybe I'm a leader or a community member, and maybe we've fallen away from prioritizing that, right? Maybe we've gotten too focused on the task and not enough focus on the human. But what do you see kind of across the board as some of the biggest challenges education or faith or people have with implementing the practice around trauma and
I think, let me try to see where to start with that. I think first I'm going to start with the philosophical or belief or attitude category, right? And what I mean by that is some people may think something like, well, I experienced trauma and I experienced stuff, and people just need to get over it and keep going. We don't need to talk about it. We don't need to, right? Because that was, I guess, in their experience, their way of overcoming and in their, what they feel like helped them.
self up by your own bootstraps kind of mentality, right? Like I had things and I pushed through, and so whatever's happening for you, you should just push through as well.
Hmm.
Yep.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
So
And
our
maybe
own
seeing,
beliefs and bias around that piece.
yep, beliefs and biases, and then that's going to continue to potentially come back up because then people might perceive these conversations as coddling or being too mushy or something like that, right? Because so it can really bleed out. But that's the attitudes and beliefs, like people's own attitudes and beliefs about trauma, mental health, about recovery, and about what it means to live life could just not align. I think sometimes people run into another kind of values clash because when you get into any organization, be it education or a faith setting, because people might have a reaction to this. So I'm gonna be careful about how I say it, but like there is a business side in some ways to doing worship. Like no, I don't think I want to say worship. I'm going to say to a place of worship. When we talk about organized religion, because people can worship in all sorts of ways that don't have anything to do with being in a building and being right. They can worship spiritually in a number of ways. Well, what I mean that when there's any type of faith, place of worship or faith tradition, religion, and there, it's an organization, so it might have a business side, meaning there are conversations about money and being able to keep the lights on and everything. So I think sometimes whatever can get the group of people in, I would say survival mode, right? So or fear, so fears of when the individuals are stressed or pressured because of finances, because of maybe some conflict relationally or something like that, and the individuals or the organization starts experiencing some sort of stress or pressure or demand, and then now you have a lot of people being operating out of survival mode themselves because it takes capacity to do this work. So if it's not the capacity or the readiness, it could make it difficult to implement.
So you and I, and we talk about this on Mindful Mondays. This is a topic that comes up quite a bit, which is, listen, I get this work. I love this work. I care about this work, but I'm in spaces with people who don't, right? So, and I see it every day. You do. Sometimes this work gets politicized. I mean, we've talked about all of this stuff. So, how do we address resistance? Because I think this is uh, one of the reasons I was actually so excited to have you on the show is like, is this piece about resistance? Because you and I have talked about it and just struggles you have in your own community and the work that you're doing. Me, likewise, the same is all of our attention seems to go on the person in the way of the work. And one of the things that I always try to preach and say is, listen, let's find the people who want to get on our bus, right? Or get on our boat. And we'll worry about the people who don't later. But like, let's try to build capacity. But it's something in the human brain. It's like, but if we could get that resistor over here, the rest of the work would be so easy. So do you have any tips or tricks for people who are listening, Dr. Holmes, about how do we address resistance or skepticism? Um, Anything that you found that's been particularly helpful for you?
Wow, I think this is just what I'm going to say, and I'm not going to say it's been helpful all the time. I'm just going to say maybe this is the way I try to approach it, is even doing approaching that through a trauma informed lens. So, meaning if somebody's behavior, their communication, or whatever is coming across as resistance, really still having a lens with them of not what's wrong with them, because it can be like it's so obvious that this is compassionate, this is love centered, this is, it's made like if I'm interacting with faith communities or something, like, okay, this is love centered, this is this, like it has mercy and grace and kindness and everything wrapped in it, which I would imagine for most faith traditions would line up with your values. So, like, so what are we talking about, right? So I could easily, and then they can get into this judgmental space. So I had to think, okay, what happened to you? Let me kind of lean in and try to understand where you're coming from and seek to understand. Okay. And at the same time, I can, in a compassionate yet clear and direct way, maybe then communicate about maybe raising some awareness about trauma informed care and show them how it really can, in a lot of ways, align with, I'd imagine align with their values, and what it is they're doing. So I would really, hopefully, that could get to, because I would assume, and maybe it's not the best assumption all the time, but assume that it has to be some misunderstanding in there, or maybe some misunderstanding of my intent or what I'm trying to communicate. Because I'm not trying to, like you say, politicize something. I'm not trying to have some hidden agenda about, especially when we get to do diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff. I'm not trying to come in and have some conversation about affirming ideology around LGBTQ issues. I'm not like, now we may have that in a conversation of safety, but that's not like why I'm having this conversation. So it's like way bigger than that. So it's like, if that's what the thinking is, let's unpack that and try to have an open, honest, and transparent conversation here that's still respectful.
Yeah. So you're really talking about that paradigm shift, right? From the what's wrong with you to what's happened to you. And I talk about this a lot. Like, it's how I survive every election cycle, right? It's like I got to stop and think, okay, what's really going on here? But for me, the piece that I would just add on is the what's strong in you. To your point, like, because I believe it, and maybe this is just my own uh me being naive, right? Which is, I think people generally want to be good people. I mean, it's the way in which they show it sometimes, but to your point earlier, because they're not attached, because they don't have safety, is sometimes very harmful. You and I agree on that. But I think they think they're doing the right thing, right? Like, that's the trick of the brain. And so that what's strong in you, but man, when someone's pushing your buttons, that's not easy, right? When someone is really holding firm. But I love that. I love the what's happened, getting yourself regulated so that you can fully see what's going on for the other person. Because if we're triggered, now we're just in a mess, right? So how do we regulate ourselves? So tell us, When you're training in education or in your faith spaces, Dr. Holmes, is there anything that you're particularly focused on? Do you have key skills that you try to emphasize to the leaders that you work with about responding to trauma or regulating themselves? You got any tricks or quick fixes that our listeners might try to use that could be particularly helpful? Something that you use yourself or that you train others to use?
Yes, absolutely. That's a good question. And so it's interesting that we're having this conversation right after a group of people that I work with. We just had the opportunity, the lovely opportunity to work with administrators in early childhood education spaces. And they represented different programs from across our state. And so I do want to acknowledge First ECE. It's a group that I work with here in my state in Arkansas. First ECE. It's a collaborative between the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences and Arkansas State University and other partners. So I've had the pleasure of working with them for about I would say about 6 years now. 6 years. And so we've been working with educators. And so we had the opportunity to just spend 2 days with educators, 2.5 days with the administrators, leadership, talking about this very thing. Talking about what it looks like to implement trauma informed care in their spaces, and then what does trauma informed leadership look like. So I did access several resources, Sheehan, including your resources on your website that you have, and you have different blogs and so forth, and resources around trauma informed leadership. And so what I did is just took that material and then just to kind of say, because we work with teachers too, and we have what we call 5 S's that we talk to teachers about how to implement that in the classroom. So I said, between all of this I've been reading about trauma informed leadership, what can be 5 S's that we can talk to leaders about what does it look like to be a trauma informed leader. So one of those S's, of course, like we started with, was safety. We have to start with that. What is it like for them to create a psychologically healthy and safe workplace for their employees, for themselves? So, safety. So, continuing to think about that. Another one is supportive relationships and environments, right? What does that look like? Not only to themselves have supportive relationships one on one with the people that they lead and serve, but what does it look like to foster a climate that feels supportive for everybody? And obviously, it's overlaps because that's going to help people feel safe and all that. So, safety, supportive relationships and environments, then self awareness. So as a leader, you have that. That's when we're having the emotional intelligence conversation. That's when we're having conversations about our attachment styles, our personality traits, and how our own traumas, right, and our own things that we're still healing from shows up in our leadership style. We have to be do that introspection and to better understand what's going on. What do we need?
Well, and that's our work. Let's just stop at self awareness. I want to hear the other two real quick, but I think we downplay self awareness quite a bit because I think most of us walk around like, no, I'm self aware. But the truth is mostly what we do is unconscious anyway. So you're not even conscious to what you yourself are doing, right? So that inside out work, I mean, you could spend a lifetime just there and never and and if I was honest as a consultant, I wish everybody would, because if we worked on ourselves, then the work together as organizations, as systems, whether we're talking about education or corrections or judicial systems or whatever, right? Faith systems, like those would be so much easier if people were doing their own internal work and could say, what's my role in this? Right? Like I know you'll support me as a clinician on this.
No, absolutely, 100%. 100%. Like, and then with the word self awareness, we have to know that some of that comes from, like, we're not even, that must mean there's some things that's not in our awareness. And we have to work to bring them to our awareness and absolutely know our role in it. Yeah. And it takes humility. It takes humility to do that in education. Sometimes for our faith leaders, that can be a challenge too, because it's like this balance of, still there being honor and respect for the position, while also there being some humility that I'm still a person too, as our faith leader, and I still have growth and everything. One person, I think you introduced me to him. I think his name is Sang Hoon. I want to say his name right. I think. Yes, see. Okay, excellent. So I had the opportunity to meet with him. Thank you for that connection. And I heard him talk about, so of course he works with trauma informed faith communities, and I just love his work. And he talks a lot about connection before correction. And so people have to realize, have that, first of all, that's part of supportive relationships and environments, but that's also part of that self-awareness of, like, whether I'm in an education setting or a faith setting, what makes me go to correction so quickly? Is it that kids are supposed to mind and they're supposed to behave and they need to listen to the adult? Is it because my doctrine is absolutely right? And if you don't like right, it gets very rigid and controlling. If we are not aware and allow the love part of us to come out, right? Like, what makes me go to that correction and bypass, that connection so quickly sometimes? And we all can do it.
Yeah. And you can get your Connections Before Corrections Chefalo t-shirt. We just launched those, Dr. Holmes. You didn't even know. You didn't even know, but we just launched Connections Before Corrections t-shirts, everybody. All right. So you told us the first three: safety, supportive relationships, self-awareness. What else do we have in our 5 S's?
So the 5 S's, and again, I definitely got to give credit to First ECE. We just presented on it with trauma-informed leadership. So this is for leaders. We have different S's when it comes to teachers in the classroom and so forth. But the other S is structure. So we have to know what so with that, that's when we're talking about clear policies, procedures, and practices. What are, because sometimes in these systems, we're going to have that. We're going to have ways that we go about doing business. And it's like, are the ways that we go about doing business, our policies, our bylaws, our whatever it is that we call them in our setting, are we having the rules, policies, and procedures that support the type of environment that we're trying to create? Okay, whether it means we're going to have like mental health days, whether it like however we handle discipline in our school setting, our behavioral policy. What does that look like? Is it trauma informed? Is it right? So structure, what is the structure? And does the structure in other businesses, what is HR? It's a lot about trauma informed HR, right? What does that look like? And the other S is sustainability. So now how do we sustain what we're doing? How can I sustain myself as a leader? So personal growth. So this does overlap with self-awareness. But what do I need to sustain myself? My own radical, holistic, all the way self-care, like for real self-care.
Yeah, which to me is your 6 S, right? Like if we were to add a 6 S, it's self-care. But to your point, the for real, not the things that give me joy self-care, but the personal development self-care.
Yes. That's part of that sustainability. How do I need to grow? And it takes that awareness to know, and to that humility to say, this is an area that, that I can grow in. I have my strengths and everything, but I also have areas of growth. So I need to seek out, what leadership opportunities do I need to seek out so I can grow and develop personally. And then organizational sustainability, that we implement these policies and procedures. So now what do I need to put in place as a leader? How do I need to think about this? So all of this work that we're working so hard to do, because I've seen educators, administrators, and fake leaders that they really do have a heart for this work. They really do. So it's like, well, how can I sustain this beyond the people that are here now?
That's exactly right. And I think that's an important piece because listen, in almost all the spaces we talk about trauma informed, it's really human services work. And nobody's becoming a billionaire in human services work, right? Like there's just that's not why you do the work, first off. But secondly, that's not right. It's no one's inventing the new tech in human services work. And so that's an important piece, that like you have the heart, but so many other things, so many other pulls sometimes get in the way. The task start to become important. So when you're thinking about that, what is the role that community plays in supporting trauma informed initiatives? I think, especially in education and faith communities. And I think this ties in a bit to what you were saying as well about DEI initiatives and LGBTQ plus conversations that we're having. But what does the role of community play in helping us push that forward?
That's a good question. So I'll just say what's coming to mind, and definitely I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts as well. But the first thing that I think is, again, one thing that we need as humans is that sense of connection and belonging, right? So I think any, because that's what I think about. Because when you say community, it's like, what do I think about when I think of community? Is healthy communities at least can provide that sense of belonging to people, right? This sense of I'm here, I'm in this work with you, right? So if we think about communities or like community organizations, that's like, hey, how can you partner? How can you support if there's work that you do? So, for example, with trauma informed care, we know that community partnerships and partnering with other people who at least your missions align, how can you partner with that person? So, with education settings, or really in faith settings too, we talk about, for example, how to partner with other mental health agencies in the community, how to partner with other community organizations that work to meet the basic needs of people, be it people who experience food insecurity or housing insecurity. And we know that the places of worship and educators, they deal with that a lot, and they have to be able to partner. So I guess that's what I'm thinking is make sure they get the word out. Like if people out there doing great, amazing work in the community, so get the word out to these major kind of places that serve a lot of people in the community. The education system serves a lot of people in the community, and especially for people in in communities that faith and religion are important and they aren't affiliated with the church, how to partner with those. So that's a reason why I'm interested in those systems, because people engage in those systems a lot. And those systems are well positioned if they're trauma informed to really help to facilitate healing and recovery. So if anybody can partner with them and say, hey, I'm out here, this is what I offer to support and help people, please make sure your schools and your local faith based places know about you.
I think you're so right there for a lot of reasons. And one is that the backbone, especially when we're talking about rural communities and small communities, right? Schools and places of faith are often the backbone. And those two places often are overtaxed and overburdened with the number of things they're trying to do. Now, both of us work in lots of school districts, and I say, listen, schools education is actually almost secondary. They're asked to be the meal provider. Some schools are asked to be the laundromat. Some schools are asked to be the therapist and counselors. They're to provide transportation in the community. Like they are doing clothing, food during summer and breaks. I mean, they're being asked to do more and more. So many schools I know that even have hygiene closets, right, for toothpaste, deodorant. Like they're being asked to do more and more and fill that. And I think the faith community is as well. I think listen, I get more and more people, leaders in churches who are coming to trainings and reaching out, not because of the faith component of their work, but because of the human services component of their work. And how do we help the people who are showing up at our doorstep? But that's such an important piece, is that the community plays a big role in both of those. And I mean, one, can you please lend your support to people who are really trying to do a lot? We know that a lot of school boards and things have taken a lot of heat, and it's like, man, schools are really trying to do a lot sometimes, and they just need sometimes a thank you as well. But I think you're right. Connecting with those people and maybe relieving them of some of the pressures that they're under is such a great way. I'm just also curious because for me, I just keep saying I feel like we need communities who actually understand the trauma informed framework. I still think there's a lot of misinformation. Um, when we talk about something like adverse childhood experience study that's been around for 30 years and the amount of people who still don't even know about it, right? And so I think that's an important piece for community members as well, is to educate themselves, to really understand the neuroscience. To your point, not you don't have to be an expert, but if you can understand the basics, I think the choices you would make in your community will change as well, right?
Yeah, I think that that's great. And what you're making me think of is when I have engaged with the community in any way, be it through the education system, and I would say certainly through the faith community system, is that with that partnership, both individuals or both organizations and systems being open to learning and having that humility, right? So yes, I think that openness to learning about trauma and the impact of trauma, kind of those 4 R's, right? Like realizing the widespread impact, knowing how you can respond in a trauma informed way, resisting re-traumatization, right? Like be open to all of what that means and looks like. I think that would be great. And at the same time, like on my end, being somebody that now I'm still learning and growing, even in the trauma informed space. And at the same time, I'm going to be open. I've learned a lot about what it means to have early care and education set in a pre-K, a Head Start. Man, learned about the wonderful work that they're doing, and I mean all of that about education. And even though I've grown up in a faith community and a family of faith, just still being open to learn more about how other people worship and what matters to them, and being open to even understanding if they, if that's part of the conversation, their theology and doctrine more deeply. So and it doesn't have to mean we're all going to have agreement about everything, but still being willing to lean in and say we all have something to learn from each other. So I love that if there can be some openness in the community about these conversations.
Well, and I think that's your last S. That's the sustainability piece as well, right? So as we think about that, and listen, we're going to come to our close here. We always end on some quick fire questions, Dr. Holmes. But before we get to those, like as you think about, we also know the advancements in trauma informed and what we know about the brain are coming quicker and quicker. Like it feels like every day, and it sometimes can feel a little overwhelming. You have any tips, tricks to staying up that you use about the latest research and development in the field to help enhance your practice? Because I know how much learning new things is critical for you. I say the same. It's why I started this podcast. I was like, yeah, I'm just going to bring all the best minds. And then I'll take 2 pages of notes while the guests are here on new things that I'm learning. And yeah, like how are you with all the stuff, especially I mean, as a clinician, like how do you stay up to speed to try to keep growing and learning to do better for you and the people you work with?
Absolutely. So I think first we all have to extend ourselves a little bit of grace to kind of say, okay, we weren't born knowing it, and it's just going to take some time. It's a journey, it's not a destination. And let's just give ourselves some grace and some time to learn. And at the same time, I just try to be in the truth of what I need. I have so many books upon books upon books, and we just can't get to all of them. So what I try to do is, be a part. I'm a part of a couple of book clubs right now, and and I just have to invest in Audible, and we're just gonna have to get audio books. And so I
Do you
just
hear
try
that
to.
audible? We should give Dr. Holmes a little I say the same thing. I just got to listen now. I don't even have time to crack that thing open, Dr. Holmes. I love it.
Mm-mm. I agree. Yep, absolutely. So I just got to be in the truth of it, and just through different books that people recommend, try to do that. And then, people are just like, I love how you're doing the podcast. It's more people who are really informed who are trying to put more out in the media space. So be it podcasts, be it on social media. And so what I do is I just follow different organizations that, I look at. I love your newsletters. They'll come out. And so I think subscribing to newsletters with different organizations that you value, like I say, yours is great, and then your website. And then, I've really enjoyed looking at NCTSN, the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. They really, now if you get on their newsletter as well, they'll send out, because they have so many resources and it's easy to miss them. So I'm glad that they've started to send out emails to where they're kind of highlighting some of their top resources. So I just try to save those emails, review those, and have some organization structure, that is, have some type of organization system to where I know I can go back to it. So I just try to subscribe to these newsletters, get on webinars, even if I can't go. Hopefully I can get the recording, and just kind of stay up on it. And like I say, have community. I think you said that we've talked a lot about community. But like I think on LinkedIn, somebody has started a group that has something to do with trauma informed, maybe it's workplaces. Or so I can't remember the name of it. I wish I could, but it's like it's several people. I think I've seen you on there and other people that we've mentioned who they'll post different articles about trauma informed. So I think again, a lot of what I mentioned is obviously technology. So that's for me, what's worked for me, the audibles, and then following, subscribing, liking these different pages of places that I follow. And like Trauma Informed Oregon is another one that I really like. Of course, the sanctuary model is great. I know I may be missing one, SAMHSA, so following the different ones and just taking it step by step and knowing that maybe I'm missing something and that's okay. And I'll come across it if I need to.
I love that. I love it. We do have to give ourselves grace. So, what are your hopes for the evolution of trauma informed? When you think about the education and religious space, and you look towards the future, I mean, we could, of course, talk about all the bad things we wish were changed right now. But what's your hopes for the future? What do you see in the next 3 to 5 years that's really giving you a lot of hope right now with regards to this work?
Well, the first thing I just say, the first thing that comes to my mind is that it's a couple of people that I work with. Like I've mentioned, some academic partners. I used to work at our local academic institution here, but I'm still in contact with them, and I feel like there's more conversations about one, like this idea of even trauma informed communities. So like even if we have education, and I know other people, I've seen other people talk about this like at a city level and a state level, but like if you like even connect education and then thinking about healthcare and faith settings, and like let's get all these leaders in the same room having the same conversation. Like I feel like now compared to 5 years ago, at least for me and in my spaces, it feels more like doable now. It's something about it that feels more like, okay, like this is maybe a possibility.
I think post COVID, I felt that switch where I used to say we need the county, the state, I'd love it to be the nation, but I'll settle for counties and states at this point to really take it on so that all the departments are kind of rowing the boat in this framework. Now, it might look different in each one, but the framework is the same, the language is the same. And I'm with you, Dr. Holmes. Prior to COVID, I was like, that's not happening in my lifetime. But post COVID, I do. I love that. Um, so tell us, let's do a couple of quick fires, and then we're going to have you tell our guests how they can find you, about all of the amazing organizations you work with. So we talked about how you're staying up. We know you're a big Audible person, but what's maybe the latest book you've listened to or television show that you've watched that stood out to you? That's
Okay, that's good. Let me see. Well, okay, I'll start with the book side, then I might just say a show that just happened to come to my mind. But the book, so this is a book club that I'm a part of. This is a recent book that I've read. It's called Holy Ghosted. And then with another book club is another book that we're gonna read. I think it says When Religion Hurts You. So both of those books have to do with like religious trauma, spiritual. So Holy Ghosted talks about spiritual anxiety, religious trauma, when there's a lot of ways that unfortunately some organized religion, and of course all of them are not like this, is not about, because some places of worship are amazing, great, love, mercy, grace center, which are amazing, and there have been people who've had experiences that have led to deep anxiety and self-doubt and a lot of emotional pain and distress. So Holy Ghosted is good. And then I'm about to start reading this book, well, listening to this book that's that When Religion Hurts You, just to better wrap my mind around the nuances of religious trauma. And then of course understanding that will help with trauma informed faith communities.
I'm adding them to my list right now. As you know, I've got some of my own religious trauma issues, and so I'm adding them as you say, Dr. Holmes. What's your TV show? I'm so curious to know what you're binge watching right now.
Yeah, well, the TV show that, now I'm gonna be honest, the TV show that I'm binge watching, this has nothing to do with trauma informed care. Now I'm gonna be honest, this may be just my own way of self care in some ways to make me laugh. But Schitt's Creek, I like Schitt's Creek. I'm gonna be honest, I love that little show. It's just funny and cute. I just love it.
I've been watching it on the plane. I agree. Makes me feel better about my own life some days, and that's what we need. If you could have dinner with any historical or contemporary leader, who would you choose, and what's the one question you'd want to ask them?
Now this is interesting. I don't know. Like for some reason, I'm just got to say who came to my mind right then. So I don't know. For some reason, Michelle Obama came to mind.
I love that. What would you want to ask Michelle Obama?
Oh, I feel like I would need more than one question. Let me see if I can narrow it down. So I think I may ask her what has been her journey in, and I'll talk some about birth and the gifts, but what has been her journey in birthing her gifts? Like, what words would she put to that, the ebbs and flows of birthing her gifts? Like, what did she learn from it? How did she go about it? Wisdom. I would just listen to all the wisdom.
I know. It's like you just need to ask her one question though, right? And then just listen. Don't say
Yeah, that's
anything
it. Just
else.
like, okay, go. I'm just out.
Just
I'm listening.
listen. All right. What one hobby or activity fills you with complete joy?
I would say probably complete joy is honestly when I'm dancing to like praise and worship music that's like Christian or gospel music, and I can listen kind of in stillness. But sometimes when I combine that with movement and just really mindfully being fully present in that, it's like that fills me up.
So tell our listeners, Dr. Holmes, how can they find you? Tell us more about birthing your gifts. You mentioned them there just briefly. And what's the best way for listeners to connect with you? What's the platform you prefer the most? Give them all the scoop of you.
All the scoop. Okay, well, I'll focus on birthing the gifts first. So that's my nonprofit, and the idea behind that is that I would like to, in that, kind of the mission is to promote emotional and social wellness and to create safe and compassionate spaces for people to truly birth their God-given gifts. You know, because I truly believe that we all have gifts and abilities and talents on the inside of us. So how to create spaces and settings and resources so people from the littles all the way up to the adults to birth their gifts. So I'm on the platforms, birthingthegifts.com.org, on Facebook, on YouTube. So just look it up, Birthing the Gifts, on TikTok, on Instagram, all of that. So I'll say look that up. And another on the LLC side that I work with is Shalom Wellness. So folks can look that up. That website is being developed, but I hope to but it's already out there. But Shalom Wellness, LLC.com, Shalom Wellness. So that's where I do some of my trauma informed work through that as well. So that's just about being healthy, whole, and well. That's what that's about, whether it's individuals, families, or organizations or systems. So that's what that's through. So those are, I would say, some of the main two. I encourage people, especially folks in Arkansas, to look at all the trauma-informed resources, though, through UAMS program as well. They have a lot out there for trauma-informed care.
You have anything coming up you want to tell our listeners about? Webinars, anything you're doing, places you're going to be speaking that they could come see you amazingly in person?
Well, I would say for right now, stay tuned for any events that's going to be coming through Birthing the Gifts. I'm working with actually a friend and a cousin who she has a nonprofit called the Prep Factory, where she works with folks to have ready for college, get them prepared for college. So we hope to have an event in March. So just stay tuned. It'll be on the Birthing the Gifts platform. And for folks in Arkansas, but even outside of Arkansas, I'm part of a professional organization, the Arkansas Association of Black Psychology Professionals. And we're going to have an event, I believe it's on November 9th. Yep, November 9th. So we hope to stream that live. But it's about, again, talking about trauma-informed care, but how parents and educators can partner to be change agents on behalf of children. So that's going to be here in person, but we hope to also have it hybrid so we can stream it out to anybody that wants to join. So yeah, stay tuned for that.
All right. I'm marking my calendar because that sounds amazing first. Like that sounds amazing. We will put links to all of these, all the books that Dr. Holmes mentioned, all of her websites. You can connect with her, of course, on LinkedIn and all of the social media platforms. Dr. Holmes, we hope you will come and join us again. Yeah, we loved having you. For everybody who's listening, thank you so much. And remember, slow down one step at a time. We can do it when we do it together. Can't wait till next time. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Holmes, for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Mindful Management, Creating a Trauma-Informed Work Environment is brought to you by Chefalo Consulting. To learn more about Chefalo Consulting and our trauma-informed change management and professional development solutions, please visit chefaloconsulting.com. That's Chefalo, CHEFALO, consulting.com. Make sure you don't miss these transformative conversations by subscribing to Mindful Management wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for listening. And remember, change happens one step at a time.